Imagine staring up at the night sky, knowing something is watching back not with curiosity, but with cold, calculated intent. The stars flicker unnaturally, and then, without warning, the sky itself seems to crack open. Ships, vast and ominous, slide into orbit like shadows stretching across the world. That's how it began the day the alien armada arrived. But this wasn't just an invasion. It was a test, a game, their first move, a chilling broadcast, a symphony of distorted voices and eerie static, whispers meant to slither into our minds and unravel our resolve. They thought fear was universal. They thought terror was a language every species understood. They were wrong. What the aliens didn't account for, humanity's greatest weapon isn't technology or firepower, it's our ability to laugh in the face of the absurd. Their messages, designed to paralyze, to demoralize, to break us before the first shot was fired, were met with something far more dangerous than fear. Mockery, memes, viral videos of their spooky transmissions set to disco beats. The moment their psychological warfare hit the internet, it became a global punchline. Their terrifying whispers turned into ringtones, their ominous warnings remixed into dance tracks, the galaxy's most advanced intimidation tactics reduced to a joke in under an hour. This is the story of how humanity turned the tables on an empire that thought it held all the cards, a war where the battlefield wasn't in space or on the ground but in the human mind. The aliens came expecting cowering victims. What they got was an entire planet rolling its eyes, and that's when they realized their fatal mistake. You can't manipulate a species that refuses to take you seriously. What unfolds isn't just a clash of fleets or armies, it's a war of wits, of creativity, of sheer, stubborn audacity. And by the end of it, the universe would learn one undeniable truth. When you try to mess with humanity's head, you'd better be ready for the backlash. Because we don't just survive, we adapt, we fight back, and worst of all, we make it funny. The alien armada's opening move was textbook psychological warfare, or so they thought. Their ships unleashed a barrage of transmissions, filling every screen and speaker with grotesque visions of their past conquests. Cities crumbling, civilizations weeping, species kneeling in surrender. The images were designed to paralyze, to make humanity see itself as just another name on their long list of victories. But the invaders made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed horror was universal. They didn't account for the human brain's ability to flip terror into comedy faster than you can say bad special effects. Within minutes, social media exploded not with panic but with memes. The aliens' ominous footage of their unstoppable war machine. Somebody slapped a cartoon hat on it. Their bone-chilling narration about inevitable doom turned into an auto-tuned parody with a catchy beat. The more dramatic their displays became, the harder humanity laughed. The invaders' carefully crafted nightmare fuel was suddenly the internet's favorite punchline, their intimidation campaign reduced to a viral joke. And that's when the aliens realized their second mistake. You can't demoralize a species that treats existential threats like content for their next reaction video. While their commanders waited for mass hysteria, Earth's response was a collective shrug mixed with creative mockery. The scarier the aliens tried to be, the more absurd they looked, like a villain monologuing to an audience already scrolling on their phones. By sunset, their grand display of dominance had backfired so spectacularly that even their own troops started questioning their tactics. After all, how do you intimidate a planet that responds to cosmic horror with humor? The answer, as humanity proved, is simple: you don't. Humanity didn't just laugh at the aliens, they fought back with the one tool the invaders never saw coming: pure, unfiltered absurdity. As the alien broadcasts grew more desperate, a ragtag team of psychologists, comedians, and internet shitposters huddled in a converted radio station, armed with coffee, clipboards, and a singular mission: to weaponize nonsense. They studied every transmission, every glitch in the aliens' eerie speeches until they spotted the flaw in their enemy's armor. These conquerors had spent millennia perfecting intimidation, but their rigid, hierarchical minds couldn't process chaos. So humanity gave them chaos. The counter-broadcast began innocently enough. A simple loop of a clown nose honking over the aliens' grand declaration of supremacy. Then came the surreal edits. Their warlord's face morphed into a singing potato, their apocalyptic prophecies spliced with footage of kittens sneezing. The aliens' solemn warnings about humanity's impending doom, narrated by a text-to-speech voice reading them in the style of a cheesy infomercial. Every rule of intimidation was broken, every expectation subverted, until their own ship's systems programmed for order, for fear, started glitching under the weight of sheer ridiculousness. Reports trickled in from intercepted transmissions, alien commanders arguing over whether the human response was a secret code or a malfunction. Low-ranking troops conditioned for obedience began giggling at their posts, an act previously unthinkable in their culture. Their great war machine, built on fear and discipline, shuddered as confusion rippled through the ranks. For the first time in their history, an entire fleet experienced what humanity calls the giggles. Systems overheated trying to analyze jokes, battle protocols crashed attempting to categorize memes, and in the heart of their flagship, their supreme leader stared at a screen showing his own face superimposed on a dancing frog, and for the first time in his immortal reign he felt doubt. The lesson was clear. The aliens had spent eons mastering psychological warfare, but they'd never encountered a species that weaponized joy. Humanity didn't just survive their mind games, they rewrote the rules. And as the alien armada systems flickered under the strain of processing human humor, one truth became undeniable. In the battle for the cosmos, the side that laughs last laughs loudest. Vex'thal's claws scraped against the polished obsidian command table as he replayed Earth's latest transmission. His own voice, digitally warped to sound like a helium-addicted chipmunk, singing a pop song about interstellar embarrassment. The screens around him flickered with human-made abominations, his fleet's imposing warships photoshopped into floating teacups, his most fearsome warriors remixed into a synchronized swimming routine. Behind him, his advisors shifted uneasily, their mandibles twitching in a way that, for their species, signaled sheer existential confusion. "Explain this," Vex'thal hissed, his third eye pulsing with frustration. "Our psychological algorithms predicted mass hysteria, subservience, yet they treat annihilation like a carnival." One brave lieutenant tapped a trembling appendage against his data pad. "Supreme Commander, our cultural analysts suggest humans possess a neural anomaly called gallows humor, an evolutionary response to process trauma through illogical levity." Another screen lit up showing a live feed from Earth, a city square where thousands waved glow sticks in unison, dancing beneath projected images of Vex'thal's face superimposed onto a disco-dancing squid. "By our metrics," the lieutenant continued, "their laughter registers as defiance, not surrender. It appears to be contagious." A muffled sound came from the back of the chamber. One of the junior tacticians had curled in on himself, emitting short, wheezing bursts. Vex'thal whirled, his crest flaring in outrage until he recognized the cadence. The tactician wasn't choking, he was laughing. The realization struck the commander like a plasma bolt. Discipline, the foundation of their empire, was unraveling faster than their encryption protocols. How do you maintain authority when your troops start finding the enemy funny? Meanwhile, humanity's counterattack escalated. Underground hacker cells infiltrated the alien network, replacing tactical briefings with absurdist puppet shows. Their drones, designed for surveillance, now broadcasted slapstick routines over conquered cities. Even the translators glitched, converting Vex'thal's speeches into grocery lists or bad poetry. The invaders' greatest strength, their rigid, hierarchical thinking, became their crippling weakness. You can't strategize against an opponent whose battle plan consists entirely of vibes and punchlines. By the third week, the unthinkable happened. Low-ranking alien soldiers began sneaking Earth's parody transmissions into their barracks. Whispers spread through the fleet, not of fear but of fascination. What kind of species turned existential dread into entertainment? The answer, it seemed, was the kind that won wars without firing a shot. Vex'thal stood before his fractured council, staring at a screen where his own image now wore a clown wig, and understood the terrible truth. Humanity hadn't just resisted psychological warfare, they'd weaponized joy, and in doing so, made the universe itself seem a little less terrifying. The aliens, desperate to regain psychological control, made their next fatal error. They tried speaking humanity's language. Not literally, of course. Their translators still mangled every third word into gibberish. No, they attempted something far worse, copying human horror tropes. Their analysts had scoured Earth's media, studying everything from vintage slasher films to apocalyptic blockbusters, convinced they'd cracked the code to our deepest fears. What they failed to grasp, the difference between terror and camp. Their grand reveal was a masterpiece of miscalculation. Instead of unleashing a genuine nightmare, their fleet projected a holographic invasion scenario so cliched it could have been ripped from a midnight sci-fi channel marathon. Glowing green, toxin clouds rolled over cities, except the effect resembled radioactive lime jello. Their bioengineered monstrosities shambled forward with all the menace of overcooked spaghetti, their roars sounding suspiciously like someone blowing raspberries into a microphone. The piece de resistance, a towering overlord announcing humanity's doom, while his hologram glitched uncontrollably, making his dramatic cape flicker like a malfunctioning screensaver. The internet reacted as the internet does. Within minutes, #worst invasion ever was trending. Side-by-side edits compared the aliens' terror drones to bargain bin Halloween decorations. Film students dissected their attempts at horror with the merciless precision of a bad movie podcast. And in a stroke of poetic justice, their entire invasion narrative got rewritten by meme culture as a straight-to-DVD parody. The aliens watched in baffled horror as their carefully staged apocalypse became fodder for TikTok skits and Twitter roast threads, what the invaders never understood. Humanity's relationship with fear is complicated. We don't just cower at monsters, we dissect them, satirize them, turn them into plush toys. Their attempt to weaponize our own stories backfired spectacularly because they missed the unspoken rule. Nothing unites humans faster than collectively mocking something that takes itself too seriously. By sunrise, their terrifying overlord had become the galaxy's most unwilling meme star, his once imposing speeches auto-tuned into a viral disco anthem. And somewhere in the cosmos, a species that had conquered thousands of worlds finally learned the most humiliating lesson of all. There's no coming back from being laughably bad. The aliens never considered that their greatest vulnerability wouldn't be their shields or weapons, but their software's complete inability to process slapstick comedy. As their psychological warfare collapsed under humanity's mockery, a new front opened in the strangest cyber war in galactic history. Deep in hidden server farms, hacker collectives dubbed themselves the Comedy Cartel, armed not with malware but with the most destabilizing weapon of all, perfectly timed punchlines. They infiltrated the aliens' comm networks, splicing their doom-laden prophecies with clips of slipping on banana peels, rogue whoopee cushions, and dramatic slow-motion faceplants. At first, the invaders dismissed it as more human absurdity until their ship-wide AIs, designed for tactical analysis, encountered something their programmers never anticipated: a pie to the face. The systems froze, logic circuits shorted, their algorithms, built to calculate trajectories and threat assessments, spun into existential crisis trying to comprehend why a custard pie impacting a dignitary's head was funny. The chaos was instant. Targeting systems misfired, mistaking pratfalls for attack patterns. communication arrays blasted out laugh tracks instead of battle codes. One warship's navigation AI, after processing 18 consecutive minutes of vintage silent film gags, interpreted its own thrusters as comedy props and executed a perfect loop-the-loop into an asteroid. Meanwhile, human operatives doubled down, flooding enemy channels with escalating absurdity, alien commanders' speeches edited into stand-up routines, tactical maps replaced with clown noses honking in Morse code. The invaders' rigid machine logic couldn't reconcile the assault. Their AIs kept attempting to classify humor as a threat vector, only to crash when confronted with punchlines that defied all martial context. A particularly vicious hack replaced their entire fleet's alarm system with a single, earworm jingle about a flatulent space squid. Within hours, their armada resembled a glitching vaudeville act, shields flickering to rimshot sound effects, plasma cannons misfiring in sync with canned laughter. By the time the aliens' tech priests manually purged the comedy virus, the damage was done. Their once feared armada now twitched at the sound of a slide whistle, their warriors flinching whenever a human grinned. The lesson: never give a species that weaponizes memes admin access to your mainframe. Because while the aliens were busy fearing death rays, humanity proved something far more terrifying. Laughter doesn't just breach firewalls. It rewrites them. Vex'thal's patience snapped like a twig under a tank tread. With his psychological warfare reduced to cosmic joke fodder and his fleet systems still rebooting from the comedy virus, only one option remained: overwhelming force. The order rippled through the armada, every warship, every drone, every last plasma battery angled toward Earth with singular purpose. No more games, no more subtlety. Just raw, obliterating firepower. What Vex'thal didn't account for, humanity had been preparing for this exact moment. As the alien fleet surged forward, Earth's defense grids didn't respond with missiles or shields. Instead, 1,000 orbital projectors flared to life, painting the void with something far more destabilizing: holograms, not of warships or weapons, but of people. Millions of them, laughing. The projections weren't static, they evolved in real time, algorithms analyzing the aliens' flight patterns and amplifying the effect. A squadron veers left, the holographic crowd points and guffaws. A cruiser hesitates, the laughter crescendos into uproarious howls. The aliens' neural wiring, honed for millennia to value rigid order, short-circuited at the sight. Their ships wobbled like spooked deer, formations collapsing as pilots instinctively recoiled from the phantom ridicule. Then came the coup de grace. Earth's hackers had reverse-engineered something far more potent than the aliens' own fear tactics: their deep-seated cultural terror of unpredictability. The holograms began glitching not as errors but as carefully crafted chaos. Faces melted into abstract art. Laughter distorted into cacophonous jazz riffs. Crowds split into infinite fractal copies, each more absurd than the last. To humans, it resembled a particularly avant-garde music festival. To the aliens, it was sensory hell. Vex'thal's flagship sensors overloaded first, their logic engines literally incapable of processing the hologram's defiance of physics. Lesser ships fared worse, entire crews clutched their cranial ridges as their equilibrium shorted out. The Armada's tactical AI, desperate to categorize the threat, kept cycling through increasingly unhelpful classifications: art installation, psychological assault, performance art, before blue screening entirely. By the time the aliens managed to blind their viewports and retreat, the damage was irreversible. Their once proud armada limped away like heckled stand-up comedians, trailing sparks and existential dread. Meanwhile, Earth's projectors kept running, broadcasting one final hologram into the void: a single, slowly raised middle finger, rendered in glorious 3 dimensions. The message was clear: humanity didn't just survive the galaxy's most advanced intimidation tactics, we heckled them into submission. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying truth of all. in the universe's great comedy club, Earth will always have the last laugh. The first signs of rebellion weren't in the alien high command's war rooms or strategy chambers. They came from the grunts. The lowest-ranking soldiers, the ones crammed into claustrophobic fighter pods and monotonous surveillance shifts, who'd spent weeks bathed in humanity's relentless meme bombardment. At first, they'd followed protocol, purging their systems of contaminant humor with military precision. But you can't unsee a warlord's face superimposed on a twerking hamster. You can't unhear your species' sacred battle hymns remixed into polka. One fighter pilot, designated 7 Scar Vortex, found himself chuckling during a target run, not at the human defenses, but at the crude cartoon someone had drawn on his radar screen. His wingmates caught it too, their neural links buzzing with suppressed amusement. Back in the barracks, troopers started smuggling human joke files in their data packs, disguising them as tactical briefings. A particularly bold mechanic even rigged the mess hall's nutrient dispenser to play laugh tracks whenever officers walked by. The breaking point came during a routine pre-battle pep talk. As Commander Wraith Spire droned on about glorious conquest, someone in the third row projected a tiny hologram above his head, a bobbing cartoon duck wearing his insignia. The ripple of stifled snickers spread like wildfire through the ranks. For a species built on unquestioning obedience, it was heresy for the humans monitoring their feeds. Pure comedic gold, deep in the fleet's underbelly, a cluster of grunts huddled around a flickering screen, watching human stand-up comics roast their entire invasion. They called our dreadnoughts glorified toasters. One muttered, mandibles twitching uncontrollably. Another scrolled through meme after meme, alien warships photoshopped into pet carriers, their supreme leader reimagined as a disgruntled mall cop. The question slipped out before anyone could stop it. Why conquer when they're this entertaining? The silence that followed wasn't disciplinary. It was the sound of cognitive dissonance cracking open. These warriors had been raised on tales of terrified species begging for mercy, not ones who turned existential threats into comedy fodder. For the first time in their military careers, they hesitated. Not from fear of punishment, but from something far more dangerous, the nagging sense that maybe, just maybe, humanity understood the universe better than they did. Meanwhile, Earth's meme factories churned on, blissfully unaware they'd weaponized doubt more effectively than any plasma cannon. The aliens' greatest strength, their unshakable hierarchy, was crumbling from within, one suppressed giggle at a time. And somewhere in the cosmos, a single grunt's rhetorical question became the spark that would ignite the most improbable mutiny in galactic history, an uprising not of weapons but of whimsy. It started with a single scrap of paper, a child's crayon drawing of the aliens as lumpy, big-eyed goofballs with comically tiny weapons. Little hands had given them silly hats, cupcake-shaped ships, and thought bubbles that read, "I smell funny." The image should have been meaningless. Instead, it became the knockout punch of the war. When a rogue hacker collective intercepted the doodle and blasted it across the aliens' own comm networks, something unprecedented happened. The invaders stopped. Not to analyze, not to strategize, to stare. To humanity, it was just another fridge-worthy masterpiece, but to the aliens it was an existential sledgehammer. Their entire civilization was built on intimidation, on the perfect geometry of fear. Every warship, every uniform, every propaganda holovid was designed to evoke trembling awe. And here was their mighty empire, reduced to wobbly stick figures holding ice cream cones. The dissonance was catastrophic. Their troops, already frayed by weeks of meme warfare, faced an enemy their training never prepared them for: irrelevance. The doodle spread like a virus. Graffiti artists scaled buildings to spray paint the cartoon aliens on bridges. Protesters waved banners of the silly figures outside occupied zones. Even Earth's remaining military forces adopted it, slapping the googly-eyed invaders onto tank turrets and fighter jets as a psychological countermeasure. But the true devastation happened behind enemy lines. Alien soldiers started pocketing crumpled printouts of the drawing like contraband. Low-ranking crewmen doodled their own versions in the margins of battle plans. The image's power wasn't just in its absurdity, it was in its simplicity, a child's unshakable truth. You can't fear something that looks ridiculous. Commanders raged, purging the image from their systems, but the damage was done. The Armada's aura of invincibility had crumbled into something far worse, a punchline. Surveillance feeds caught warriors hesitating mid-battle, their targeting scopes flickering to the doodle they'd secretly saved. The greatest military force in the galaxy was losing to the equivalent of a banana peel on the stairs of history, and then the final twist, the child who drew it. They never knew, while admirals fumed and empires trembled, that little human was fast asleep, crayons still clutched in their hand, dreaming of ice cream and spaceships, completely unaware they'd just drawn the most devastating weapon in the war. The ultimate humiliation wasn't defeat. It was being immortalized as a punchline by a species that refused to stop giggling. The fractures in the alien armada didn't begin with mutiny or sabotage. They started with a single warrior laughing during a sacred battle hymn. Not a nervous chuckle, not a coerced response to human propaganda, but a full, belly-deep eruption of joy at the absurdity of it all. That sound, more than any weapon, cracked their empire's foundation. Within hours, the fleet splintered into factions. Traditionalists demanded immediate orbital bombardment to erase Earth's cultural contagion. Reformists argued for tactical withdrawal, their reports filled with uneasy phrases like psychological entropy and morale degradation. But the third group, they were the real problem. These were the defectors' fighters who'd spent too long immersed in Earth's transmissions, their rigid minds rewired by exposure to sitcom laugh tracks and absurdist memes. They didn't just abandon their posts, they did it flamboyantly. Some hijacked comm channels to broadcast blooper reels from human game shows. Others arrived at Earth's checkpoints wearing handmade Hello Kitty armor modifications, bellowing requests to apprentice under the great comedic masters. The most fervent formed a breakaway faction called the Disciples of the Punchline, their manifesto scrawled on stolen navigation charts. To conquer the universe, one must first understand the timing of a well-placed pie throw. Chaos erupted aboard the mothership. Commander Vex'thal found himself presiding over emergency council sessions that devolved into slapstick. Advisors tripped over inexplicable banana peels. Tactical holograms glitched into looping clips of cats falling off furniture. Even the sacred fleet AI, once an unshakable oracle of war, started responding to strategic queries with stand-up comedy routines. The Disciples, meanwhile, launched their own counter-broadcasts, clumsy but enthusiastic attempts at human-style humor. Their first viral hit, a painfully literal knock-knock joke delivered via planetary loudspeaker to an entire continent. Earth's response, a standing ovation. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as history's most disciplined military force unraveled into a cosmic improv troupe. Traditionalist ships fired warning shots at defector vessels, only for the lasers to be digitally altered mid-flight to resemble rainbow sprinkles. Ground troops ordered to suppress laughter riots instead joined in, their powered armor doing the Makana. The Disciples, now calling themselves the Sacred Jesters, declared Earth their spiritual homeworld and began exporting human comedy at scale. Badly translated sitcoms flooding alien markets, meme templates etched into asteroid surfaces, a poorly dubbed version of Airplane. Becoming required viewing for their recruits. By the time Vex'thal's flagship retreated into hyperspace, tailed by a ragtag convoy of giggling defectors, the outcome was clear. Humanity hadn't just survived an alien invasion, we'd exported our chaos, and as the Disciples of the Punchline set up their first comedy dojo on Mars, one truth echoed across the stars: the universe might conquer with weapons, but it's laughter that builds empires. Vex'thal's claws dug into the command podium as he prepared his final address, the speech that would reignite his fleet's shattered discipline. The view screens showed his remaining loyalists assembled in grim formation, their carapaces dull with exhaustion. He drew himself up, mandibles parting, to deliver the most fearsome oration of his reign, only for the ship's speakers to blare an accordion-heavy polka remix of his very first invasion threat. Somewhere in the human resistance, a DJ with too much caffeine and access to alien comms had been waiting for this moment. The track was masterful Vex'thal's once terrifying declaration of "kneel or be erased," now set to a jaunty oompa beat, complete with yodeling sound effects timed to his dramatic pauses. The bridge crew froze, the live feed to every ship in the fleet glitched, and then it happened, a snort, then a wheeze. Within seconds, the armada's disciplined silence shattered into uncontrollable guffaws. Vex'thal's third eye pulsed crimson as he watched his warriors collapse against consoles, their rigid carapaces shaking with laughter. One gunner accidentally fired a torpedo salvo in the rhythm of the polka. A dreadnought's navigation AI began tap-dancing the ship in circles. The Supreme Commander roared orders, but his voice had been auto-tuned into a squeaky cartoon chipmunk's, thanks to humanity's last hack. His holographic banners, meant to display the Empire's insignia, now flashed dancing pickles wearing tiny versions of his battle crown. The final humiliation came when his own second-in-command handed him a note mid-rant. Vex'thal unfurled it, expecting battle reports. Instead, in shaky alien script, it read, "Why so serious?" The lieutenant pointed to a view screen where the disciples of the punchline had projected a live feed of Earth's population doing the conga line across continents, their laughter echoing through the void like the universe's most devastating counterattack. As the polka reached its crescendo, something snapped, not in the ship's systems, not in the ranks, but in Vex'thal himself. The despot who'd conquered 100 worlds found himself staring at his own reflection in the view screen. And for the first time in his life, he saw not a conqueror but a punchline. His shoulders sagged, his crest drooped, and as the last strains of yodeling faded from the speakers, the mighty Vex'thal did the one thing no invasion algorithm had ever predicted. He joined the laughter. The moment the alien fleet transmitted that single, glorious image, a white flag crudely photoshopped over their Supreme Commander's tear-streaked face, captioned in wobbly Comic Sans, humanity's meme factories fell silent for the first time in weeks. Not out of shock, but out of sheer, stunned appreciation. This wasn't just surrender, this was art, the ultimate shitpost from a species that had spent centuries perfecting intimidation, now reduced to acknowledging defeat in the language of internet trolls. Social media erupted like New Year's Eve crossed with a viral apocalypse. The hashtag #AlienTears trended globally within minutes, but here's what made their capitulation so delicious. It wasn't just an admission of defeat. It was an act of cultural mimicry so painfully earnest, so human, that it revealed more about the war's outcome than any victory parade could. The aliens hadn't just lost, they'd been assimilated. Their white flag wasn't a stock image. It was a hand-drawn doodle, complete with shaky lines and a poorly erased sketch of a middle finger underneath, like a kid hastily covering up graffiti before the teacher sees. Their tears animated with sparkle motion effects. Even their font choice was a masterstroke Comic Sans, the universal typographic scream of "we have no idea what we're doing anymore." The disciples of the punchline, now self-appointed ambassadors of Earth's comedy hegemony, intercepted the transmission and upgraded it before rebroadcasting to the galaxy. Their edit added a laugh track, a popping confetti overlay, and a subtitle, "Congratulations, you've unlocked the fuck around and find out achievement." Back on Earth, late-night hosts roasted the surrender image like a bad high school yearbook photo. Scientists published peer-reviewed papers analyzing the precise shade of alien embarrassment in the commander's cheeks. Street artists projected the crying alien face onto skyscrapers, turning cities into galleries of cosmic schadenfreude. And then came the piece de resistance, humanity's official response. Not a stern diplomatic communique, but a collaborative TikTok stitch featuring thousands of humans, from toddlers to grandmas, mimicking the aliens' tearful expression while lips sinking to Crimea River. The message was clear: we didn't just beat you, we made you participate. The galaxy's most feared empire had become the universe's longest-running improv comedy crowd work bit. And as their ships limped home, trailing glitter and self-awareness, one truth echoed louder than any victory anthem: never challenge a species that turns trauma into content. Because in the end, the aliens didn't surrender to our weapons, they surrendered to the punchline. The war rooms of Earth's United Defense Councils were eerily silent for the first time in months. Not because of some lingering dread or tactical tension, but sheer, dumbfounded disbelief. Generals, politicians, and strategists pored over the same reports, blinking on holographic displays, each confirming what their instincts still refused to accept: humanity hadn't just survived an alien invasion. We'd clowned them into submission. One grizzled admiral scrolled through the data, paused on a graph comparing meme proliferation to enemy retreat patterns, and muttered, "We spent trillions on missiles, and the knockout punch was a PowerPoint slide of their warlord as a crying Wojak." The psychological impact was staggering. Earth's militaries had drilled for every nightmare scenario: orbital bombardments, bioengineered plagues, even grey goo nanotech. But no contingency plan accounted for this. Not a single war college lecture had covered comedic timing as a tactical superweapon, the closest comparison. A declassified Cold War experiment where the US military accidentally discovered that broadcasting absurdist radio plays at Soviet submarines caused their sonar operators to report hallucinations. Even then, nobody imagined scaling that up to planetary defense. Then came the debriefs from captured alien soldiers. Their testimonies read like bad stand-up material. One pilot confessed his entire squadron aborted a bombing run after their targeting. "I started prioritizing jokes over coordinates." Another described the moment his dreadnought's crew, hardened veterans of 100 conquests, descended into giggles during a human sitcom rerun. The laughter, he admitted, was more contagious than our bioweapons. Earth's analysts quickly pinpointed the fatal flaw in the alien psychology. Their brains processed humor like an unsolvable math problem, short-circuiting under the cognitive load of irony. The real kicker: humanity's accidental masterpiece of psychological warfare hadn't even been coordinated. No central command had orchestrated the meme blitz. No general signed off on the absurdist counterattacks. It was just the internet being the internet, a decentralized swarm of shitposters, artists, and sleep-deprived comedians operating on pure, unfiltered chaos. One intelligence officer summarized it best: "We didn't weaponize comedy, comedy weaponized us." Meanwhile, the aliens' surrendered tech revealed their cultural archives, thousands of years of solemn conquest logs, not a single joke in sight. Their species had literally never developed satire. No wonder they never stood a chance. As the reports piled higher, a single question hung in the air: what now? The disciples of the punchline were already drafting treaties in the form of roast battles. Universities launched extraterrestrial humor studies departments. And somewhere in a bunker, a low-ranking private who'd single-handedly memed an alien cruiser into surrender was getting promoted to TikTok liaison. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity, we finally had our answer to Fermi's paradox. Advanced civilizations don't vanish because of war or disaster. They get cancelled by a well-timed meme. The last thing anyone expected was the knock on the United Nations door, not from diplomats but from a delegation of defected alien warriors, their once gleaming armor now festooned with novelty bow ties and kick-me signs taped to their carapaces. They came not with weapons but with clipboards, their translator drones emitting a perfectly rehearsed plea: "We formally request asylum as comedy exchange students." At first, Earth's leaders assumed it was another prank. Then the security footage rolled, former enemy commanders practicing knock-knock jokes in mirrored halls, their mandibles struggling to form the cadence of "Who's there?" Low-ranking grunts crowded around tablets playing Seinfeld reruns, taking frantic notes on human, social protocol. The disciples of the punchline had gone rogue in the best possible way. They'd essentially radicalized their own military into a galactic improv troupe. The asylum hearings were unconventional. One warrior presented a binder titled, "Why I Deserve Citizenship," featuring 300 pages of moth jokes. Another demonstrated earthling small talk by awkwardly complimenting the Secretary General's shoes for 7 straight minutes. The piece de resistance, a former dreadnought pilot's interpretive dance titled "Ode to the 3-Second Rule," performed with solemn reverence to a whoopee cushion soundtrack. Humanity's response was predictably chaotic. Late-night hosts offered honorary degrees in sarcasm studies. Subreddits erupted with adoption memes. Alien seeks roommate, must tolerate dad joke rehearsals at 3 a.m. But beneath the laughter, something remarkable was unfolding, the first recorded case of wartime surrender transitioning into cultural osmosis. These weren't prisoners begging for mercy. They were acolytes desperate to master the art form that had dismantled their empire. The irony was almost too rich. The galaxy's most feared conquerors now lined up outside comedy clubs, their neural implants flashing with real-time laugh analytics. Former shock troopers traded war stories over open mic nights, their battle scars hidden under rainbow wigs, and in a twist no sci-fi writer could have predicted, Earth's greatest export became stand-up comedy tutors. The same species that once trembled at alien warships now sold out arenas teaching ex-invaders the difference between slapstick and satire. The final confirmation came when the first alien-run comedy club opened in what was once an enemy dropship hangar. Their debut act, a self-deprecating roast of their own failed invasion, complete with a PowerPoint slide titled, "How to Lose a War in 60 Memes or Less." The crowd, humans and aliens alike, howled until the rafters shook, and as the headliner took his bow, he uttered the line that would echo through history. Turns out, the real final frontier was the punchlines we made along the way. The first interstellar comedy show didn't start with a spotlight or a curtain rise. It began with a microphone feedback squeal so piercing it made 3 different species' antennae vibrate in unison. The venue, a repurposed alien dreadnought hangar, its walls still scorched from battle, now draped with disco balls salvaged from human karaoke bars. The lineup, a former enemy shock trooper bombing his first knock-knock joke, a human improv troupe performing Alien Invasion, the musical, and a quadriplegic AI stand-up whose punchlines were delivered via fireworks synced to sarcastic binary beeps. The audience, half-terrified diplomats, half-giddy defectors, and one very confused alien admiral who thought he was attending a war crimes tribunal. What unfolded that night wasn't just a show, it was a cultural big bang. The human comedians quickly learned that sarcasm didn't translate but physical comedy. Universal, a pratfall got gasps, a pie to the face triggered synchronized mandible clicks of delight across the alien contingent. Meanwhile, the ex-invaders discovered their niche in absurdist deadpan. One warrior delivered a 15-minute monologue about the existential dread of forgetting where you parked your warship, his face utterly motionless as the crowd wheezed. The AI stole the show by projecting holograms of itself as a grumpy toaster, ranting about younger appliances these days with their fancy Wi-Fi. Backstage, something extraordinary was happening. Former enemies huddled over datapads, sketching joke structures like battle plans. A human writer whispered timing tips to a defector, nervously practicing his first "Yo Mama" joke about planetary crust density. The disciples of the punchline officiated these collaborations with the gravity of peace treaty negotiations, declaring, "A culture that laughs together doesn't glass each other's homeworlds." The real turning point came during the finale. The lights dimmed as a hologram flickered to life, a child's crayon drawing of humans and aliens holding hands under a stick figure sun. Then, live on stage, that same human child handed a crayon to an alien grunt. Together, they added a speech bubble. Oops, the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the sound of a galactic paradigm shifting. That single, silly sketch became the show's closing act, projected onto the hull of the mothership for the cosmos to see. By sunrise, the hangar had become a makeshift comedy college. Alien linguists decoded puns like ancient hieroglyphs. Human neuroscientists mapped how different species processed surprise versus slapstick. And in a quiet corner, two former enemies, one who'd once plotted orbital bombardments, the other who'd memed his face onto a dancing potato, sat side by side, workshopping a bit about the universal struggle of trying to parallel park a spaceship. The galaxy would never be the same, not because of treaties or trade agreements, but because laughter, they'd discovered, was the one force that could travel faster than light. The hangar's makeshift stage trembled as 7-foot-tall Klaxian warriors shuffled onto it, their battle armor replaced with oversized novelty glasses and "Hello, my name is" war criminal stickers. The spotlight caught the quiver in their mandibles as they gripped the mic, not with the confidence of conquerors, but the nervous energy of open mic rookies. Their first joke landed like a misfired plasma cannon. "So we tried to invade Earth, pause for dramatic effect. Turns out shock and awe doesn't work when your enemy's too busy screenshotting your warships for meme templates." The crowd erupted, humans howled, fellow defectors clacked their carapaces in applause. What began as a tactical retreat had morphed into the galaxy's most unlikely comedy revolution. These weren't just punchlines, they were psychological disarmament. Former enemy commanders now riffed about their tactical blunders with the glee of dad jokes. One ex-dreadnought pilot recounted how his ship's AI, corrupted by human meme viruses, started interpreting evasive maneuvers as dance moves. Ever seen a kilometer-long warship attempt the Macarena? Our shields held up better than our dignity. The audience wheezed. Night after night, the catharsis grew. Alien warriors who'd once recited propaganda now workshopped self-roasts about getting outsmarted by a species that weaponized TikTok trends. The crowds chanted one more set, not out of pity but genuine awe. There's something transcendent about watching a genetically engineered super soldier deadpan. Our intelligence analyst said Earth's greatest weakness was short attention spans. Jokes on them, we got cancelled faster than a Netflix show. Even the hecklers were part of the spectacle. When a drunk human yelled, "Your mama's so slow," her reaction times measured in geologic eras. The Klaxian comic didn't bristle, he fired back. "At least my mom didn't lose a war to a species that pronounces GIF wrong." The room exploded. Behind the scenes, something profound was unfolding. Open mic nights became crash courses in interspecies therapy. Human comedians taught timing. Alien defectors explained which of their cultural taboos were ripest for parody. The disciples of the punchline published manifestos on the healing power of well-executed yo mama jokes. And in dimly lit green rooms, former enemies bonded over shared horrors, not of battle but of bombing on stage. Nothing bridges civilizations like the universal terror of silence after a failed punchline. By the third month, the shows had gone interplanetary. Livestreams beamed to distant colonies showed Klaxians in sequined vests delivering tight 5-minute sets about failed bioweapons. Turns out our unstoppable plague just gave humans really clear skin. A particularly brave comic even roasted the ex-Supreme Commander's hologram live on stage, projecting his infamous crying meme while quipping, "Look who finally learned the difference between extermination and exterminating your own credibility." The hologram glitched. The crowd lost it, and somewhere in the cosmos, a once fearsome empire realized the terrible truth. They hadn't just lost the war, they'd become the opening act. Vex'thal never imagined his greatest humiliation would become his salvation. After slinking back to the outer colonies in disgrace, nursing both his wounded pride and the galaxy's most infamous meme collection, the disgraced commander found himself staring at a holographic offer he couldn't refuse, a headlining spot at the Cosmic Chuckle, the first interspecies comedy club. His initial reaction, a growl about warriors reduced to jesters. Then he saw the paycheck, turns out the very qualities that doomed his invasion. That bone-dry monotone, the unshakable seriousness even as his hologram was remixed into disco, made him a comedy goldmine. His first set was accidental genius. Striding onstage expecting boos, he instead faced a packed house chanting his name. Flustered, he defaulted to his old invasion speech patterns. You will surrender your inhibitions. Resistance is hilarious. The crowd lost it. His deadpan delivery turned even mundane observations into killer punchlines. You humans complain about traffic. Try coordinating a fleet jump when half your pilots are busy screenshotting nebulas for their aesthetic. Roaring applause. Soon, the Vex'thal hour became mandatory viewing across 3 systems. Critics praised his unintentional anti-comedy, comparing his delivery to a malfunctioning teleprompter reading existential poetry. His grumbling only fueled the act. I once vaporized rebellions with a glance. Now I get tipped in LOL tokens, yet behind the scenes something unexpected happened. The more he leaned into the bit, the more the old rage faded. Crowd work became his therapy. When a human shouted, "Your mama's so slow, her warp drive runs on dial-up," instead of invoking orbital strikes, he volleyed back. At least she didn't raise a son who got outsmarted by a species that puts pineapple on pizza. The room exploded. Even his former troops, now loyal fans, projected crying, laughing emojis over his head. The ultimate twist, his warlord instincts adapted brilliantly. He studied human comedy like battle tactics, analyzing timing like troop maneuvers. By season 2 of his holoshow, he was weaving callbacks into hour-long arcs, his once rigid mind now relishing the chaos of improv. Stand up is war, he told his opening acts. The audience is the enemy, and surprise is your only weapon. The night he premiered his top 10 failed alien invasions were number 1. Special, even Earth's late-night hosts admitted defeat. The universe had a new truth: never underestimate a species or a commander that learns to laugh at itself, especially when the royalties start rolling in. The first intergalactic prank started innocently enough. A human-engineered jury rigged an alien food dispenser to substitute their nutrient paste with birthday cake frosting. The Klaxian crew, expecting their usual bland rations, spat out the first sugary mouthfuls in shock, then immediately demanded seconds. What began as a silly joke spiraled into an arms race of absurdity when the aliens retaliated by reprogramming Earth's weather satellites to make it rain glitter in the Pentagon's parking lot. By the time someone swapped the Martian colony's oxygen sensors with whoopee cushions, it was official. The galaxy had entered the Great Prank War. Scientists still can't explain some of the side effects. When humans rigged a defector's anti-gravity boots to play "Never Gonna Give You Up" at full volume during zero-G training, the resulting resonance frequency accidentally stabilized a quantum reactor 3 systems away. Alien physicists are still writing papers about how a whoopee cushion deployed near a black hole's event horizon produced acoustic waveforms that temporarily reversed entropy. The disciples of the punchline, now the universe's premier prank think tank, officially classified these incidents as comedic engineering breakthroughs. Their research division spends more time studying slapstick chain reactions than actual weapons tech. The escalation reached its peak during the infamous moon heist. A team of human comedians and defector scientists conspired to temporarily replace Jupiter's smallest moon with an exact holographic replica, except this version wore a tiny top hat and monocle. The prank lasted 6 hours before astronomers noticed, but the aftermath was legendary. Gravitational models predicted tidal shifts that never occurred, proving the hologram somehow interacted with space-time itself. Theoretical physicists now joke that the universe has a humor setting, an undiscovered law of nature where sufficiently advanced comedy warps reality. Not all pranks were harmless fun. The Great Office Chair Uprising, where aliens hacked every swivel chair in Silicon Valley to rotate counterclockwise against Earth's rotation, nearly triggered mass nausea-induced riots. Humans countered by replacing an entire fleet's navigation systems with GPS directions narrated by a sarcastic British squirrel. One cruiser ended up orbiting a Denny's for 3 days because the AI insisted the pancakes were worth the detour. Diplomats had to step in when pranks started affecting critical infrastructure, drafting the Galactic Geneva Convention Addendum. No messing with toilets, thermostats, or coffee makers during wartime. Yet beneath the chaos, something remarkable emerged. These weren't acts of aggression, but cultural exchange through controlled absurdity. When Klaxians introduced humans to dimensional doodlebugs, creatures that temporarily turned anything they touched into abstract art, Earth's architects adopted them as avant-garde collaborators. The week-long period when all of Tokyo's skyscrapers resembled melted crayon drawings, considered a landmark in urban design evolution. Meanwhile, alien scholars developed entire academic fields studying human prank psychology, publishing papers like The Ontological Implications of Slipping on a Banana Peel. The war's legacy lives on in unexpected places. That fake dark matter prank where researchers filled a nebula with scented bubbles accidentally created a new propulsion method when ships discovered the strawberry-scented particles reduced friction by 90%. The annual Anti-Gravity Pie Toss Championship draws more viewers than the Solar System Olympics, and in a quiet lab on Mars, 2 former enemies, one human, one Klaxian, watch their latest experiment with bated breath, a device designed to harness cosmic irony as an energy source. Early tests suggest sarcasm might be the universe's most renewable resource. Perhaps the ultimate punchline is this: the same species that once trembled at each other's war fleets now compete to make each other snort laugh in zero gravity. The Great Prank War didn't just bridge civilizations, it proved that laughter doesn't just defy physics. Under the right conditions, it rewrites them. Nobody expected the Ferax and the Veln to stop their 1,000-year war over disputed nebula mining rights because of a rerun of friends. Yet there they were, their delegations crammed into a neutral sector space station's viewing lounge, mandibles twitching in unison at Chandler's sarcasm, tentacles slapping equivalent laughter against their armored hides during Joey's "How You Doin'?" Cameos, what peace treaties had failed to accomplish in centuries, Ross and Rachel's on-again, off-again drama achieved in 6 seasons. By the time Phoebe's smelly cat echoed through the observation deck, the 2 species were exchanging awkward high fives, or whatever passes for high fives when one party has prehensile stingers and the other has 3 elbows. Turns out shared hatred of a sitcom love triangle is the great unifier. The Ferax, who communicate primarily through bioluminescent guilt trips, found unexpected kinship with Monica's obsessive cleaning. The Veln, whose mating rituals involve competitive spreadsheet optimization, wept openly during flashbacks about Richard's mustache. Their armadas still faced off across the nebula, but now with a weirdly specific ceasefire clause: no attacks during new episode drops. Galactic historians scrambled to document the phenomenon, entire civilizations bonding not over resources or ideology, but which friend's character they'd vote off the show first. Spoiler, it was always Janice. The ripple effects were staggering. Neutral zones became binge-watch hubs. Warring factions adopted human terms like "spoiler alert" into their ceasefire lexicons. One notorious warlord even leaked his private fanfic where Phoebe and a Ferax hive mind open a vegan restaurant together. The disciples of the punchline, sensing opportunity, launched humor ambassadors, crash courses teaching aliens to weaponize nostalgia and inside jokes instead of plasma cannons. Their first textbook, How I Met Your Overlord, a field guide to sitcom diplomacy. But the real breakthrough came when the Fearsome Alliance petitioned Earth for assistance in their most urgent mission, remastering The Office with culturally appropriate cringe humor. Human comedy writers found themselves scripting gag arcs about intergalactic HR violations, while alien linguists painstakingly localized Michael Scott's awkwardness into 12 different languages, including one species that communicates via interpretive tap dance. The resulting hybrid was bizarre. A Fearax version of That's What She Said involved rhythmic venom sac pulsations, a Veln adaptation of Bear's beats. Battlestar Galactica replaced bears with black hole accountants, yet somehow it worked. By the time the first interspecies Dundee Awards ceremony was broadcast across 3 systems featuring categories like most likely to accidentally start a war over a misunderstood meme, the galaxy had quietly rewritten its definition of diplomacy. Peacekeeping forces now included laugh track analysts. Treaty negotiations opened with "Which Parks and Rec character are you?" personality quizzes. And in a dimly lit cantina on the edge of contested space, a grizzled Fearax general clinked glasses with his former Veln nemesis, their argument over whether Seinfeld was a show about nothing or a profound meditation on cosmic futility destined to last centuries. The lesson: you can't glass a planet whose pop culture you've subtitled for your mothership's book club. It started with a single misfired thruster. A Klaxian scout mid-patrol near Earth's lunar colony veered wildly off course and accidentally blasted into frame just as a human engineer snapped a victory selfie after fixing a reactor. The result, a grinning human in grease-stained coveralls, thumbs up with a bewildered alien warrior photo-bombing the shot in perfect comedic timing. His 3 eyes wide, his mandibles slack, his battle claws raised like he'd just been caught stealing cookies. The engineer, being human, did the only logical thing, posted it online with the caption, "When you realize your Uber rating's about to tank, the galaxy lost its collective mind." The image spread faster than warp drive, morphing into 1,000 variations. Someone added party hats. Another turned it into a distracted boyfriend meme with Earth and Mars as the love interests. A particularly inspired artist reimagined it as a Renaissance painting titled "The Audacity of This Biped." But the real magic happened when the disciples of the punchline got their appendages on it. They projected the image onto the side of a derelict warship orbiting Jupiter, scaling it up until the alien's expression of pure "oh crap" was visible from 3 planetary systems away. Overnight, the meme became a cultural handshake. Alien factions embroiled in border disputes started using it as a ceasefire watermark. Human cities beamed it onto skyscrapers alongside "Welcome to Earth, mind the stairs." The original Klaxian scout, once mortified, found himself signing autographs on his armored carapace with a novelty "I was the photobomb" stamp. The image power wasn't just in its absurdity, it was in its honesty. Here was proof that even the most advanced warriors could be reduced to awkward, relatable moments by the universe's unpredictable sense of humor. Then came the monuments. First, a holographic statue on Mars, 30 meters tall, the human and Klaxian frozen mid-laugh. Then a mural in the Earth Lunar Transit Hub, where passing travelers added their own doodle speech bubbles about lost luggage, tiny aliens photobombing other aliens in the background. The Piece de Resistance, the Galactic Senate, in a historic unanimous vote, declared the image an official symbol of absurd solidarity, etching it onto their council chambers' doors with the caption, "In the grand cosmic joke, we are all unwilling photobombers." The engineer who took the original photo, she runs guided tours now, pointing to the reactor where it happened like it's a holy site. This, she tells wide-eyed alien tourists, is where the universe realized we're all just trying to smile before the camera flashes. And somewhere in the void, the scout's former commander sighs every time he sees the image on a commemorative plate, because no amount of tactical training could have prepared him for the ultimate defeat, becoming a fridge magnet. The Galactic Tourism Bureau's official designation came with all the fanfare you'd expect: confetti cannons loaded with glitter, holographic ribbons slicing through the sky, and a marching band comprised of 3 species whose idea of music involved rhythmic antennae buzzing. But nothing could have prepared Earth for what came next: pilgrims, not armed invaders, not solemn diplomats, but wide-eyed alien tourists clutching selfie sticks and phrasebooks titled "Human Sarcasm, a Survival Guide." The planet, dubbed Galactic Comedy Capital, had become the universe's must-visit destination, and nobody was ready for the Yelp reviews. First came the meme pilgrim scholars from the Zeta Reticuli system who treated old internet forums like sacred texts. They'd stand in reverent silence outside the birthplaces of iconic memes, whispering theories about the deeper meaning of "distracted boyfriend," or leaving offerings of energy crystals at the altar of the first ever Rickroll. Tour guides quick to capitalize led shitpost safari expeditions through the internet's archaeological layers. And here, in this ancient chat log from 2020, a human first typed lol unironically. Note the primitive spelling, a precursor to the modern Quechua. Then the professionals arrived, alien comedians desperate to crack the code of human humor, signed up for brutal open mic nights in basements that reeked of stale beer and existential dread. Their sets were experimental. One poor Vortian spent 10 minutes trying to explain the concept of knock-knock jokes to a species that communicated via scent pulses, resulting in what historians now call the Great Gaseous Incident of 2387. Meanwhile, Klaxian improv troupes performed human workplace roleplay with terrifying accuracy, their sketches about TPS reports and Michael from accounting proving that cosmic hilarity really is universal. But the real cultural exchange happened in the unlikeliest places. Alien food critics wept over the comedic perfection of spaghetti sliding off a fork, declaring it the slapstick ballet of the culinary arts. Intergalactic architects reverse-engineered the acoustics of comedy clubs, convinced the sticky floors and 2-drink minimums were part of some grand sonic alchemy. Even Earth's dad jokes, once the bane of family gatherings, became revered as high art. The day a 6-armed warlord from Andromeda stood on the steps of the UN and solemnly asked, "Why don't skeletons fight each other?" before collapsing into giggles at his own "they don't have the guts." Punchline was the day humanity realized we'd won something far stranger than a war. We'd won tenure as the universe's head clowns, the pinnacle, the grand comedy conservatory established in what used to be Area 51, where alien scholars now dissect the Three Stooges with the intensity of quantum physicists and debate whether "who's on first" counts as avant-garde absurdist theater. Graduates receive degrees in applied ridiculousness and return to their homeworlds as certified humor ambassadors, armed with whoopee cushions and a working knowledge of pun warfare. The galaxy will never be the same, because when your greatest cultural export isn't weapons or technology, but the ability to make a room full of squid-faced bureaucrats snort laugh at a well-timed "that's what she said," you haven't just changed the game. You've rewritten the rulebook in glitter. The hardcover first run sold out in 37 seconds, not because of some interstellar embargo or tactical scarcity, because the entire Klaxian homeworld pre-ordered copies, and half the human population wanted it as a coffee table conversation piece. How I Lost a War to a Punchline wasn't just a memoir. It was a cultural artifact, a leather-bound monument to the universe's most spectacular case of cosmic egg on face. Critics called it the art of war rewritten by a court jester with tenure. The New Galactic Times hailed it as a masterclass in turning self-owns into performance art. And Vex'thal, he spent his book tour in a state of bewildered pride, his mandibles permanently twitching between outrage and reluctant amusement. the irony was thicker than the book's gilded pages. Here was a warlord who once vaporized rebellions with a glance, now signing copies for giggling schoolchildren who'd taped his infamous crying meme to the inside covers. His chapter on tactical errors and why you should never let your enemy meme you first became required reading at military academies, not as a cautionary tale but as the gold standard of how to fail upward. The scene where he describes realizing his holographic propaganda had been replaced by a looping gif of a sneezing panda, pure tragicomedy. His earnest breakdown of human psychological resilience, they weaponized joy. Joy, what kind of evolutionary nonsense is that? A read like a PhD thesis written by a stand-up comedian. What nobody expected was the depth lurking beneath the self-deprecation. Between punchlines about mistaking a whoopee cushion for a bioweapon, Vex'thal unpacked the existential crisis of a species encountering true absurdity for the first time. We had protocols for supernovas, not sarcasm, he admitted in one particularly raw passage. Our entire civilization was built on the premise that fear is universal. Then we met a species that greets extinction events with, well, that's not ideal, and animated reaction memes. The book's climax wasn't the surrender. It was the moment he watched his own troops snicker at a poorly translated Monty Python sketch and realized discipline had already lost. The piece de resistance, the audiobook, voiced by Vex'thal himself, his gravelly war commander monotone wrestling with punchlines like a cat in a sweater, it became a comedy album in its own right. Listeners lost it when he deadpanned lines like, "And then I learned the human term clown car, which, for the record, is not an actual military vehicle, no matter how many of my soldiers insisted otherwise." The cherry on top, the afterword, where he solemnly declared, "This is not a humorous text," before the sound of a deflating whoopee cushion played over the credits. Fans dissected it like scripture. Alien philosophers debated whether his journey from conqueror to clown prince was a redemptive arc or the universe's longest-running roast session. Late-night hosts invited him on just to watch him squirm through mean tweets segments featuring his own troops' jokes. And through it all, Vex'thal maintained the perfect straight face, until the day a human interviewer asked if he'd considered a sequel. His third eye blinked, his claws flexed. Then, for the first time in recorded history, a Klaxion Supreme Commander uttered the phrase, working title, How to Write a Bestseller While Your Dignity is Still in Witness Protection. The universe, it seemed, had finally found its Shakespeare of Schadenfreude. Legacy of laughter centuries later, historians cite the war as the moment the galaxy learned to take itself less seriously, with textbooks noting, "The day fear lost to a well-placed that's what she said." The conflict didn't just end with treaties or territorial concessions, it rewrote the foundational principle. Interspecies diplomacy, where once empires measured strength in fleet sizes and plasma yields, the new galactic standard became comedic resilience. The Great Sarcasm Index emerged as a universal benchmark for civilizations, with economists tracking the rise of humor GDP alongside traditional metrics. Museums dedicated to the war didn't display weapons or armor. They curated holographic memes, vintage reaction GIFs, and the original crayon doodle that broke an empire's morale. Scholars argued whether the conflict should even be called a war. Some insisted it was history's first stand-up special with orbital consequences. The ripple effects were staggering. Military academies replaced war game simulations with improv classes, grading cadets on their ability to roast hostile ambassadors without triggering trade sanctions. The Intergalactic Court of Justice established precedents like Satire v. Sovereignty, ruling that parody constituted protected speech even when it depicted warlords as teapots. Entire professions sprang up overnight: meme archaeologists, irony translators, diplomatic laugh track engineers. The Klaxion defectors who'd once trembled at fart jokes now held tenure at Earth's comedy theory institutes, publishing papers like Punchlines as Particle Physics, Why the Perfect Timed Pause Warps Spacetime. But the true legacy wasn't in institutions, it was in the quiet moments. Children on distant colony worlds played invasion tag, where the goal wasn't conquest but making your opponent snort laugh mid-chase. Alien couples adopted human dating rituals, bonding over shared hatred of hacky sitcom tropes. Even funeral rites evolved. It became tradition to end eulogies with the deceased's favorite terrible joke, because nothing honored a life like one last groan-inducing pun. The galaxy had discovered a universal truth. Laughter didn't just heal wounds, it built bridges no engineer could fathom. And so, when the Andromeda Consortium finally made first contact with the Milky Way, their grand emissary didn't arrive bearing gifts of technology or poetry. He stepped onto the podium, adjusted his holographic tie, and delivered a single, flawless setup. So 3 black holes walk into a bar. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds, just long enough for the tension to peak before the assembled diplomats erupted. Not in panic, not in awe, in delight, the emissary's mandibles curled in satisfaction. His species had done their homework. After all, why study weapons when you could master timing? The history files would record it as the moment 2 galaxies became neighbors. The comedians knew better. It was the night the universe's biggest open mic began. The final broadcast wasn't just a message in a bottle tossed into the cosmic ocean. It was a cultural warhead disguised as a time capsule, packed to the brim with humanity's most potent ammunition, jokes. The alloy shell, engraved with a smiley face winking alongside the universal symbol for "Play Me," contained everything from Chaplin's silent pratfalls to a supercut of history's most awkward handshakes, all carefully curated by a cabal of comedians, linguists, and that one guy who'd successfully rickrolled an alien fleet. The attached note, scrawled in Sharpie by a sleep-deprived PhD student who'd mainlined too much espresso, read like a Surgeon General's warning for humor. Contents may induce side effects including but not limited to snort laughing in zero gravity, spontaneous peace treaties, or the sudden realization that your millennia-old empire's flag looks suspiciously like a whoopee cushion. Scientists debated the ethics of unleashing Monty Python's Galaxy Song on unsuspecting civilizations, while diplomats nervously pondered whether the office cringe humor counted as a violation of interstellar Geneva conventions. The disciples of the punchline, however, insisted this wasn't just mischief, it was a public service. The universe deserves to know what it's in for, argued their chief archivist, a former alien shock trooper now sporting a proud Papa of Pranks mug. Their selection process was ruthlessly democratic. Shakespearean insults shared hard drive space with TikTok dance fails, and a single, sacred USB drive held the holy trinity of "Never Gonna Give You Up," the "This Is Fine" dog, and the entire B-movie script just in case. The launch itself was peak humanity. The capsule, strapped to a repurposed missile painted like a giant rubber chicken, blasted off to the sound of a stadium crowd chanting, "Send it." As someone's grandma lobbed a pie at the launch director for good luck, tracking beacons pinged back not coordinates but laughter ratings, a crude but effective system measuring how hard hypothetical alien audiences might wheeze at "Why did the chicken cross the road?" In 7,000 languages, the disciples live-streamed the journey like an interstellar comedy roast, offering commentary like, "If the Vogons find this before the Klaxians, we're legally required to apologize for all the poetry jokes." But the real genius was in the failsafe. Should some humorless bureaucrat species intercept the capsule and deem it a threat, the outer shell would split open to reveal a backup payload, a holographic stand-up set performed by the galaxy's first AI comedian, programmed to adapt its material in real time to exploit each civilization's deepest existential insecurities. Its opener, so a godlike being walks into a bar, orders the universe, and then asks to speak to the manager. As the capsule vanished into the black, humanity's last transmission wasn't a declaration of war or a plea for peace. It was a blooper reel set to yakety sax, featuring every species we'd ever met: Klaxions tripping over their own tentacles, Veln diplomats accidentally photobombing supernova surveys, Vex'thal's infamous mic drop moment where he'd face-planted into a wedding cake during a diplomatic reception. The message was clear: the universe might be infinite, but nothing travels faster than a punchline, and if some distant civilization ever hits play on that golden disc, well, the disciples had one final Easter egg waiting: a single frame of a child's crayon doodle captioned, "P.S. You're the alien in this joke now." The victory banquet didn't take place in some grand hall or aboard a gleaming starship. No, humanity's defenders gathered where it all began: a dimly lit, sticky floored comedy club in downtown Chicago. The same hole in the wall where the first meme warfare task force had doodled battle plans on cocktail napkins. Now the walls were papered with printed out alien surrender memes, and the disco ball overhead spun lazily, casting glitter over Klaxion carapaces and human flight suits alike. Someone had duct-taped a party hat to the holographic bust of Vex'thal in the corner, its third eye blinking in what might have been resigned amusement. A hush fell as Sergeant Ruiz clinked a beer bottle against the microphone. She wasn't the highest-ranking officer present, just the one who'd accidentally live-streamed the infamous spaceship photobomb heard round the galaxy. To the idiots, she began, grinning at the sea of aliens and earthlings crammed between cracked leather booths, who thought terror was a universal language. The room erupted. Klaxions clicked their mandibles in approval. Former enemy commanders toasted with novelty mugs reading, "World's okayest conqueror." Even the disciples of the Punchline's founder, now sporting a sequined cape and a name tag that said, "Ask me about my dissertation on Yo Mama jokes," wiped an ocular tear. It wasn't just the booze or the confetti cannons loaded with glitter courtesy of the great prank war surplus. There was something deeper in that room, a shared understanding that the real triumph wasn't in surviving the invasion but in rewriting its rules. While historians would later debate whether the conflict counted as a war at all, the veterans knew the truth. They hadn't fought with bullets or bombs, but with the most dangerous weapon of all, the audacity to laugh when the universe expected screams. Somewhere around the third round of toasts, a Klaxion defector, once a feared shock trooper, now a rising star in intergalactic improv, grabbed the mic. "You humans," he wheezed, his translator glitching with suppressed laughter, "taught us something our empire never could." He paused, savoring the timing like a seasoned comic. "Fear makes enemies, but laughter," the room leaned in, "laughter makes accomplices." The punchline hit like a well-aimed pie to the face. Former adversaries howled, sloshing drinks as they leaned on each other for support. Outside, the galaxy spun on, its wars and grudges momentarily forgotten. For tonight, at least, the universe's most unlikely peace treaty was written in spilled beer and bad puns. And as dawn crept over the skyline, the club's neon sign flickered one last message to the stars: "No covered charge for revolutionaries, just bring your funniest failure." The door swung shut behind the last stragglers, but the echo of laughter lingered, proof that against all odds, humanity's silliest instincts had somehow, impossibly, saved the world.